So yes, I come from the big agency background, and really, I suppose I'm going to touch on that rather scary chart quite quickly, and then dive into what I like to refer to as boots on the ground experience with content marketing programs that I've been a part of in the UK, in the US, and around the globe. But don't worry, it really is. I'm going to try and focus on those useful things that I think can get us started. So, inside 120 seconds, I wanted to give you a bit of value. There's value. That's a method, if you will, to developing a content marketing program, where it goes through the steps of looking at what your target audience is looking at, working through the plan on into how you deploy it and analyze it. And you will get this chart, don't worry, so you don't have to strain your eyes. But it goes through and explains a little bit about each step involves and the outputs. So in a big boiling the oceans approach to content marketing, that might take three to 6 months and cost upwards of 6 figures. For me, what I would like to get across is what's important is the approach and the method. And if you go through those 6 steps, you don't always have to spend that much money or take that time. Often our businesses don't allow us that luxury. But if you do follow that framework, I promise you, you will have a good content marketing program that'll deliver for your business. Now we're moving into the hints and tips. So the first thing I want to say is that first box was about assessing and looking at what your target audience interacts with. It's not what you want to give your audience or force upon them. It's what they're prepared to look for, and then you make sure your information is where they're looking for information and is positioned in the type of stuff they're looking for. So what's a poor man's approach of getting that without having to spend lots of money and taking months? Be a detective on Google. If you go on Google and you think through that user journey, that customer, that prospect's journey, what they search for, where they go when they search it, and you literally take a day and a number of very strong cups of tea, you will get to the content they engage with. You'll get to the places they go for the information, and you get a sense of the language they use when they're searching for information. Now, very quickly, there's an offline technique you can use as well, which is to get 10 of your best customers, call them with a mini survey of, say, 4 to 5 questions. Where do you get your information? What do you find most interesting when searching for, enter your product area? And then the final question is, are there 2 or 3 people that you really admire or you turn to for information about this category that you think would be okay for me to call? Or you'd give me the number. And then you call them and you repeat the same thing with ask for the 2 or 3 names at the end of it. Within the 3rd cycle of that, you will have a very good sense of where your prospects and customers are going for information, what they're engaging with, and what they find most meaningful. Now, a big hint here, be open-minded. I've done that exercise 3 or 4 times. In each case, it's taken us to places that we didn't think people were going to for information, and about content that clients, if you will, didn't expect people were valuing. Hint tip number 1, be a detective, follow that user journey, and you'll see what your users are thinking about. The key there is to think out of your perspective what you want to push at them and what they're going for. This is sort of a 1B point, and Tim covered it off a bit already. One of the things you'll see quite quickly if you go through that detective exercise is there are watering holes, as I like to call them, places where people will go to find information that's not always published by brands. So this is a bit of a generalization, but there are basically 2 types of content. There's the content, think of digital press releases or infographics, things that are pushed out by brands, and by the way, that's the dominant amount of content that's pushed out on the internet. That goes out, has a high frequency of distribution, but low engagement. So there's a lot of it, but people don't go too deeply with it and look beyond it. The second one is higher engagement, but lower incidence, and that would be customer reviews in particular. People love to dig more deeply into customer reviews and ratings, but there are fewer of them. So it's high engagement, low frequency, if you will, and the other one's high frequency, low engagement. What you get here is you get a good sense of the deeper engagement content. So how many of you have been on Money Saving Expert? About 9, wow, there we go. More than bought a newspaper today, I hasten to add. There are about 9 million people in the UK who go to this site regularly. Amazing. Mumsnet, equally high figures. And as you will all know then, you see strings of conversations around credit cards and mortgage rates, and people are engaging with experience, what they found, what they learned. So as a sub-point to the first point, when you walk through that detective exercise, you will find these watering holes where people share information, be it TripAdvisor, Money Saving Expert, or Mumsnet, and this is where you find out how people engage in greater depth with content, a very, very important part of understanding your target audience needs. And we'll give you some big hints in terms of what you should do to put content out there will be engaged with most. So I mentioned the North American program I was involved with. It was a big insurance company, and we developed a big digital relationship lead nurturing program, which had in it a big content marketing engine. And as part of that, we were, I think it's the second one down the audit. Once we'd established the user journeys, we were looking at what content was out there. And they were prepared to spend lots of money buying in content or creating new content. But before we did that, we said, well, let's audit what you have. So we took time, spending time thinking about the parameters, what would be most engaging given what we learned in the first step. And then people went out and searched through the silos of the company, of which there were several silos, and maybe you can relate to this, silos within the business that never talked to each other or shared much of the information they created. And the thing about Fortune 500 companies is they create an enormous amount of content for events, for PR releases, for quarterly financial announcements. It's amazing. Anyway, big corporate conference call with people from around the world, and then this woman from Chicago came on the line, and I can only say there was this sort of innocent, giggling excitement because she'd gone through her cupboards and found all this relevant research and insight material that absolutely fit the audit parameters that would be of great interest, but she didn't think anybody was interested anymore. It was just sitting collecting dust in her cupboard. You'd be amazed how much you can find in your organization across the silos that is incredibly relevant for your target audience. And I would encourage you to do that first. It'll save you money because you don't have to go out and buy that, but it'll also help you define the brief of what you need to go for. Well, I have that, and then I know this is what they're interested in. Therefore, I do need to have a media relationship with, say, Fortune magazine to provide a certain type of content that I don't already have. Hit number 3. So whatever the question is, in terms of content marketing, the answer is probably video content. I'm going to touch on this. Dave will speak more about video content in a minute, but I would like to read you a couple of numbers, which I think are fairly compelling evidence, so let them wash over you. People spend 2.5 times more time watching short, relevant video than they do, say, uploading PDFs and reading through website copy. Watching a video increases your conversion rate by anywhere from 46%, that was in published data, but I can tell you from working on programs, up to 300%. There's a little bit of a data bias there because people who are interested in that material will tend to watch the videos more often, but that's not such a bad thing. And increasing your conversion rate by 300% ain't such a bad thing either, but there are similar type effects of having video content that people watch. People who view product videos are 85% more likely to buy. Video on your website increases your SEO performance by anywhere from 50 to 500%. That's the number from Forrester. Anyway, why? Well, Tim mentioned it's a proxy to human interaction, which is quite important. But I think about it more in sort of boots on the ground, practical basis. I feel really stupid asking the same questions about a pension program for the 5th or the 6th time. But the truth is, even after the 5th or 6th time, I don't really understand how pensions work. And I think a lot of people are the same, right? You don't, but if you watch a video, you can replay it over and over again. And perhaps to a lesser extent, people who don't have English as a first language can watch the videos over and over again without feeling awkward about asking the question. So extend that psychology out to getting information about products and services. It gives you the comfort without being sold to necessarily, or jumped on, or feel awkward about asking stupid questions. So what does that mean? That means that today, people are thinking about video content not as a one-off or a two-off per year, where big expensive ad agencies charge you £100,000 to do, but rather the question is, instead of 1 or 2 per year, how do you do 5 per week? And how do you drive down the cost and deliver the quality and focus that on the specific needs, from replacing website copy to helping brief analysts on a quarterly financial basis, through to product demos and case histories for customers. Let's say I'm going to stop there because Dave will talk a little bit about that. But you need to be planning for content now. And I would suggest think of it more as fresh video content 5 times per week as opposed to 5 per year. Right. Number 4. Focus on the content will get talked about, not necessarily, again, the stuff that you want to push at people. So about 80% of the time, information is transferred face-to-face. About 10% over the telephone, and the remaining bit, 7 to 10%, is online. I'll say it again, because usually, funny enough, sometimes with the big agency sector, you say, where does information get transferred? Where does all this content get talked about and shared? And everybody says, Facebook or whatever, online. The truth is that information gets exchanged primarily face-to-face. I won't go into the depths of why that happens, but I think it kind of makes sense. You trust somebody, the person who's giving that information gets additional credibility by offering you that information, etc. That does not, if you will, denigrate the importance of what's going on online, or what's happening online, but I would encourage you to think about that as an information distribution engine. In fact, it's more important because you've got to put the information that people are interested in, that they'll get, and then they'll talk about. 80%, that's a pretty significant number. And the scenario I would encourage you to think about in terms of your content is people sitting around a table having a coffee, and what are they going to talk about? Now, quickly on that, did some research on financial services around credit cards, and we found that people do not sit down opposite their friends and colleagues and say, you ought to get an Amex card, it's really good, it's got 18.5% whatever, and da-da-da-da. What ends up happening is, I hear you going to France on holiday. Fantastic, that's interesting. We went on France 2 years ago, we had a really good time. Hey, by the way, be careful when you take cash out of the machine, because if you do it with a credit card, you get extra charges. And you say, well, that's interesting, how do you avoid that? And I said, well, I found out, my credit card, I'm able to do that and I don't get charged. And on and on and on. And about 4 or 5 levels into that discussion comes a recommendation. So that's a cynical advice-based story. You hear that sometimes in the world of network theory and word of mouth. But that's the kind of scenario that generates the conversation where you want your product, your brand, to be inserted and discussed. I worked on a program, everybody familiar with Little Mix? The bat now, from X Factor? Yeah. So they launched a cosmetics brand, or a cosmetic brand was launched using their fame. Just to give you a sense, it's a bit of an involved program, but we went out to girls 14 to 17. They got a box with makeup and T-shirts, candy and whatnot. 500 of those distributed across the UK, and there would be a night where they would open it and they'd have their friends over. It was called Mixer's Night In, so sleepover parties around the UK, and then we connected it all with social media. The total number of posts related to that one night of activity, well, the lead up of the night, and then what happened after, was 2 million. 2 million posts, 8 million reach. That gives you an indication, actually, of sometimes if you insert fame into that alchemy, what it can do in terms of generating reach. And I think any of us would be happy with a campaign, old or new, that reaches 8 million people. My last helpful hidden tip is measurement. I left this for the end. I don't know why. Usually results are always discussed at the end of ideas. But I will. What I want to point out here is sort of the obvious thing. Know what you want to achieve. But that's all right. But where do you start? Where do you find out what you want? I mean, should I be focusing on likes in Facebook? Is it about reach? How does that relate to what I'm specifically looking for? So my helpful hint and tip here is to look at what your competitors are doing and see what kind of numbers they're getting in. On another program I was doing, the worldwide CMO was keen to have a big program that would get millions of hits on YouTube and be pushed around social media. So I showed him different examples of the sort of stuff people were doing in the industry. And on one end of the spectrum, there were people getting 800,000 to 1 million hits, but it tended to be a really funny film. It was a good joke. At the other end, it was 2,000 to 3,000 hits at best, which was content more specifically related to the industry. And once we got through talking about that, he became a little less interested in the program because I think he wanted a big, 1 million hit thing. But it did manage his expectations around what people were doing in the industry and what they were getting in terms of hits, video views, and what they were defining as success. So a nice shortcut, without having to boil the ocean, is to look at what the competitors are doing, what they're achieving, and then you can decide what makes the most sense for you. With that, I will end. Those are my 5 helpful hints and tips. I hope they were helpful. And we're around later, so I'm very happy to answer any specific questions relating to that. Thank you.